Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I am back from my 3-week tour through the US and Canada. I actually came back last week, but I needed some time to kind of decompress and get back into normal living stuff. But anyway, I thought for this video I would kind of do a short recap kind of thing, but also just talk about the realities of being on tour and what that means and everything else. Especially for people who are unaware and haven't done it themselves. I think this could be a little bit of a eye-opening kind of video for some of you who maybe want to tour or are thinking about touring or going into their first tour. Just some things to think about. So the first thing I'll talk about is how it went, and it went pretty well. We flew down to Phoenix. Subsequently, at the Phoenix airport, we only had 15 minutes from when we got our bags to when we were supposed to catch our bus that goes from Phoenix to Tucson, where sort of the first shows and meeting up with the other band and stuff was happening. Unfortunately, in the chaos of trying to make this bus and grab our bags and everything else, I will blame others, but it's probably still my fault. My passport was left behind. I got a phone call. They were like, hey, we have your passport. So, missed the bus. We're waiting for the next bus, and we're like, well, hopefully they don't make us pay. Maybe we can give them our old ticket, and they'll just let us on. And not the case. We gave the bus driver an extra $100 to let us on, which I'm fairly certain was a bribe, but it was still cheaper than buying new tickets, so we were okay with doing that. It was like a 2-hour bus ride, got to Tucson, hung out for a day, had some really good Mexican food, and then waited until the show started the next day. And so we went from Tucson to Albuquerque. Albuquerque was a really cool show, a little DIY spot. From Albuquerque, we went to Santa Fe, and Santa Fe was one of my favorite shows of the tour. It was at a really cool, fancy restaurant brewery kind of thing. Also very sort of Western themed, and had some good food and stuff like that. And it was one of the bigger shows, so it was fairly packed in there. Lots of good crowd interactions and everything else as well. And it was just a cool spot to be in. So I really liked that show. From Santa Fe, we went to Denver, fairly certain. Denver was okay. I think it was just, it was the middle of the week and blah, blah, blah. But the bands we played with were cool, and the spot we played at was also really cool. So we just didn't sell as much merch as I was hoping that we would. And it's one of those places that are like, oh, I really want to play Denver, and had big expectations and stuff like that. So from Denver, I think we went to, I might have to pull this up actually. Oh wow. We went straight from Denver to Omaha, Nebraska. That was a long ass drive. So that part sucked. And then when we got to Omaha, it's Omaha. I actually thought the city itself was kind of cool. Had this strip thing that was interesting, had different cool little spots to eat and drink and stuff like that. Had a crazy Mason temple that looked like a nightclub. It had neon fucking lights and shit on it. Crowd was a little smaller. And I think this is the big thing about touring the Midwest in the States, is that it's hard because you are driving a lot and the crowds are not necessarily as big as some of these other towns, right? So from Omaha, we went to Rock Island, Illinois. Again, it's a pretty long drive. Again, I don't think we sold too much merch that day either. A lot of these Midwest kind of places were difficult. But then we went to Minneapolis, and Minneapolis was a cool show. I liked the bands that we played with quite a bit, the local guys, just because they were a little bit more gothy, and I thought that was a cool mix for us. Then we went to Rapid City and Bismarck. Again, both of those places fairly small. The Rapid City place was cool just because it was at a cave and on basically somebody's property. So I mean, the crowd was fairly small, but they were fairly enthusiastic, and was just cool to be at a cave and all that shit. Really cool scenery. But of course, as we're playing, there's like a forest fire that's like on the next mountain over. So we're like worried that we're going to have to get evacuated and not be able to play and blah, blah, blah. But worked out in the end, so that's cool. Bismarck, we played at a record store. So small crowd, but it was all ages. And I kind of like that. I like seeing people young coming out and being able to participate in shows and that kind of thing. So that was cool. Then we went back to Canada, and the Canadian shows were good. We had our Saskatoon show, unfortunately, canceled by the promoter, who I guess double booked. But he decided to double book a open mic comedy night. So I mean, you can't move an open night, like open mic night. It seems a little weird, but whatever. But the Canadian shows were good. It was nice to be back home. Around this time, I started to feel a little bit better about my own personal shit. But I'll get to that after I finish recapping. So yeah, all the Canadian shows were good. We played Edmonton, we played Calgary, we played Kelowna, we played Vancouver. And then the West Coast shows were good. We played Tacoma at the Overkill Lounge. Small show, but the people that were there were enthusiastic. And again, they bought a bunch of merch. And that's, you know, like 2 people bought like $50 worth of merch each. And that's more than we made in like some of the Midwest towns where there were 20, 30 people there. So interesting. Seattle was really good. Liked the bands we played with. Apparently David Cross came out for the last band, but I didn't see him. I guess he was just in town doing his own shows and just happened to walk in or something. I don't know how it all worked out, but interesting. And then Eugene, Reno, LA, San Diego. The only one that was a bit of a bummer from that was the LA show, just because we ended up merging the last 2 shows in LA and San Diego together. And so it was a big lineup. Started at 9, and by the time we were on stage, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And so basically everybody at that point had left, and you know, I don't blame them. It's like quite late. It was a Saturday, which kind of sucked, and again, you have high hopes for a place like LA, but you know, it is what it is. We drew the short straw and had to play last. So, I mean, it is what it is. And then ended in San Diego, and the San Diego show was really good. Okay, so that leads me into the main topic of this video, and it is, what is touring actually like? Touring is getting up early in the morning, driving all day, and then playing a show for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then trying to fall asleep. And it's kind of the cycle of that repeated daily. I will say that the longer drives, they really wear you out. And then the shows really help to bring up the mood again. So you're like bored all day, you're like trying to figure out something to do, you're on your phone, you're trying to nap, you're doing this and that, and then you'll play the show and you'll feel great. And it was pretty consistent throughout the entire tour that once you play the show, things feel good again. But it's hard. Like I said, the drives are quite long. I think, especially for this one, going through the Midwest and parts of Canada, there's some really long drives in there. And to do it in the way where you have to meet a specific deadline means you have to get up at a certain time. You have to piece out your breaks on the roads so that you're not wasting too much time. You're accounting for traffic if it's a big city, and you typically end up getting to the big cities at like 4 when it's worst time for traffic anyway. The worst by far for traffic for me, I thought, was Seattle. I actually thought LA wasn't too bad, but I think it's because it was like Saturday. It wasn't as bad. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, we started the tour. I have some, you know, social anxieties with people and crowds and stuff like that. So I already kind of have to manage my emotional well-being when on the road, especially. And like sometimes it's like I don't want to be here. I would much rather be home. And that's kind of the reality of it, is that, you know, as much as a regular job kind of sucks, at the end of it, you go home and you recharge. When you're on the road, you don't really get that recharge. You're kind of just grinding the entire time. And for our tour, where it was basically 3 weeks straight, we had one off day, but the only reason it was an off day was because our show got canceled, right? So that was our Saskatoon day, and we had already, at that point, it was a driving day. So it was like, God, it was, I think 10 hours one day and then a little bit more the next. You know, for this tour, we partnered up with another band, and credit to them, they're awesome people and they were super easy to get along with. But even still, you're going into a van with a bunch of people that you don't know. And for me, it created this anxiety level that was pretty constant, basically until we got back to Winnipeg. And, you know, the familiarity of being in my home country, I think, really helped. And then I got to see my wife and stuff in Kelowna, so that also really helped. But yeah, if you struggle in any way with, you know, social anxiety, or you're introverted or whatever, maybe try to strike it out on your own. It can be very expensive though, and that's ultimately why we chose to buddy up as well, is because it's just so expensive to rent a vehicle and to like logistically organize everything and everything else. You pay more in gas, everything else. It just wasn't financially viable. So we partnered up, and again, credit to them, they were awesome. But you know, in my head, it's all going to explode at some point, and like, you know, we're all going to be pissed off at each other the entire way, and that didn't happen. But you know, that's my worry on the road. That somebody's going to have a bad time and then fuck it up for everybody else and whatever else. Which, you know, leads me to the next thing. If like you're on the road for 3 weeks with even people you do know, they're eventually going to get on your nerves. And like even the little things that like normally don't bother you start to bother you. And definitely by the end of it, I was like, I need to get away from these people for a while. And you know, that's another thing to be expected, is that like you know, the little things, because like, you know, maybe you're practicing every week or whatever, and it's like 2 hours, and that 2 hour practice period, totally fine. And then you're on the road for a week and you're like, oh my God, these people. So that can happen too. The other thing is that you're eating like crap and you're sleeping like crap. So that part is kind of awful. Because like for us, you know, we're trying to save as much money as we can. We're getting campsites most nights. Sometimes we're staying with people who, you know, give us a place to stay. On the rare occasion, we'll get a hotel. I think we got 3 hotels in the 3 weeks. And then we got a plethora of fucking campsites. And the camping's really good. We had a really nice tent that unfortunately we had to give away because we couldn't bring it back on the airplane. But it was like a fold out thing, and it was super easy to set up and took like less than 5 minutes. So that was really helpful actually with the whole camping thing. But yeah, then you're sleeping on the ground and like you're fighting for space, and it's hot and it's sweaty, and you're you know, doing this and that, and then sometimes there isn't a shower, so you have to kind of like go the next day without a shower. And you're hot and you're stinky and you're sitting in a van and you're not really moving around or anything, so you're not really exerting any energy. So you're restless. So then you try to sleep. You don't really sleep. At least I don't really sleep in the car. You kind of like doze, and like you're still tired. So all day you're tired, and then you play the show and you feel good. But yeah, basically my only real advice for that is to sleep as much as you can and to shower as often as you can. But bear in mind that if you are showering, if you need extra time to do your shower, you need to wake up earlier, and that is on you and not the rest of the bands to wait on you. We experienced that a little bit with a member in my band, and it's kind of like, well, come on, dude, you gotta hurry up. People are waiting, shit like that. Yeah, those are kind of the things. And then, you know, making sure you're communicating with the band that you're touring with. Like, we had some miscommunications and this and that, and there were some resentful sort of feelings bubbling up between the bands. And sort of on the last show, we settled everything and everything was cool. But, you know, making sure that there's transparency between you and the other band you're touring with, if you're touring with another band, it's really important. And just clear communication of like what's happening with, you know, different things, whether it's who's driving or who's handling money things and who's doing what. My suggestion for all that is to work it out ahead of time, and come to a consensus together, whether or not it works, right? And to hopefully get it in writing, especially because like it's just difficult to trust, I guess, somebody else with their intentions, right? Especially if you don't know them previously. Just a word to the wise, just like try to knock as much of the confusion or the ambiguities there you go, of what you're actually trying to accomplish together. Because it is like, you know, it is a like a partnership between bands when you go on tour, and like regardless of whether you're opening for somebody or you're headlining yourself, I think you know, we're all trying to make this thing happen together. So it's just important to communicate and make sure that things are clear, because it can be confusing and it can lead to resentments. So you know, what are the pro things? The pro things are, you know, you get to play a bunch of places and meet a bunch of people that you wouldn't necessarily be able to otherwise. And, you know, the conversations can be quite cool just because you're in a totally different place and, you know, you have a shared experience of music. So I had a really long conversation with a guy in Tacoma whose name escapes me for some reason right now. Just about venues and about, you know, his bands and stuff like that. And I thought it was really cool to hear a bunch of the stuff about, you know, the Tacoma, Seattle area of, you know, their scene and stuff like that. And, you know, meeting other bands. We met some cool guys in Spectral Decay, and we linked up with Tribunal, who are also from Vancouver, for LA and San Diego, and it was nice to be able to actually have a show with them. Funny enough, it happened, you know, thousands of miles from our hometown, but yeah, it was cool to be able to play with them. I've been a fan of theirs for a while, so that was really neat. And so like you get these like moments of like things that you'll never do if you're not touring. It's rare that you, unfortunately, that you get to like explore the city properly. We had a little bit of extra time in Edmonton, so a bunch of people went to West Edmonton Mall and like hung around and stuff like that. We had a little bit of time in Minneapolis, so I got to walk around the city. I think that's where Mall of America was, but I didn't see it. It was like too far away from where we were. But I did get to see a bunch of cool giant billboards and stuff like that. And they have I think it's the Mississippi, I think, that runs through it. Maybe that isn't. Maybe it's a different river. I don't know. Anyway, big river, and so got to see a lot of cool stuff with that. And a bunch of bridges, and, you know, just being able to explore the city a little bit is cool. But beyond those two, to not really have a lot of time to explore anywhere else, really. Maybe a little walk here and there, but like in Omaha, I got to walk down the like downtown strip that they have a little bit. I went for a sandwich and then I went back. Like it was 20 minutes of walking around. So unfortunately with touring and with longer drives, you don't necessarily get the tourism sort of experience too much. You basically just see the venue. So it's not really like it's not really a vacation. It might sometimes feel like one. You know, you're not working, you're, you know, in a foreign country and you're playing shows, which is really fun. But ultimately it feels like work because most of the time you're just driving. And that's the other thing. If you're going into a tour, you should think of it like work. If there's a specific load-in time, if there's a specific start time, if there's, you know, anything else that you need to do in order to make the shows go off like how you want them to, that should be your first consideration. You know, making sure that people's shit is set up, helping the other bands tear down or tear up, I don't know, set up, and loading in and loading out as fast as you can and as efficiently as you can. And then getting up in the morning, making sure that you're showered and prepared to leave when you need to leave. Like all these things. And sometimes that means foregoing a shower. Maybe that means you only get 4 hours of sleep instead of 5. But you should have a professional demeanor about what you're doing on tour. Because it's about the shows, and it's about making sure that the shows go off as best as you can. And I think a lot of inexperienced bands maybe don't realize that. And like, yeah, just certain things, just making sure that that is your priority. If you're going on tour, the show is the priority. Make sure that you're there on time. Make sure that you load in on time. And yeah, and then you'll have good shows, and that's just how it is. If you're rushing around and you're getting in way late and you're trying to load in gear while there's a bunch of people sitting around, you know, enjoying the show and stuff like that, it looks bad. And it means that you're stressed out. So avoid the stress, leave early, give yourself extra time for stops and lunches and whatever else, and they'll all be good. The other thing I'll talk about is money. We did not make money on the tour. Shocker. It's very expensive for a Canadian band to go to the States and to tour. You can risk it a little bit with the visas. We ended up paying for premium processing to make sure that we could meet the deadlines in order to have the paperwork ready to go when we went. The cost of doing that is very high. It's like $2,600 for the processing fee alone. And then I believe on top of that, it's more per visa. I would have to talk to Sean a little bit more. He did all the visa work himself. And then we went through the musicians union to help do the paperwork stuff and to file it and to make sure that it goes to the right people. You get a bunch of things with it, including like travel insurance and health insurance and stuff like that. But there are union dues that you have to pay, and the union dues were like $1,100. So, you know, altogether, before you even start playing, before you even start getting, what's it called? Merch stuff, you're already in the hole for thousands. You have to think of that as an investment. Most likely you won't make the money back on your first tour. You can extend your visa if you continue to book shows in the States that fall within the lines, and then you can extend it. So now it's a game of trying to maintain the visa. So we'll be playing at least something in the States probably every year for the next little while. But yeah, then once you have the visa, you don't have to keep paying all these fucking fees and shit. And that is unique to the States for foreign bands. So like I think in Canada, you don't need a visa if you're less than 2 weeks or something like that, or you have a certain number of shows, and then the visa fees are less. So like the people we toured with, they're called Suicide Forest. They didn't have to pay anything to come to Canada and play shows. On top of that, you need to make sure that your merch table is fairly full. My suggestion is, you know, multiple pieces of merch. So if you're doing t-shirts, you should definitely do t-shirts, but most likely you'll want at least 3, if not more. We started the run with 2 designs, and then when we got to Vancouver, we added a few more. Just by adding, it makes the table look more full and invites people in, and we sold more just based on that. It's important to make sure that your merch table is full, but that also costs money. And so the cost to do shirts, I haven't actually gotten the invoice yet. It's likely going to be $1,000 for 100 shirts or so, something like that. And that's fairly common. And we sold for quite a few of them, but we'll have to put a bunch of them on fucking Bandcamp and shit and try to earn some money back that way. But there's that, and then there's, you know, the CDs and the vinyl and everything else, and it can add up pretty quick. So you really need to like save a lot of money if you're planning on touring, especially in the States. If you have a vehicle rental on top of that, fuck me, like you're fucked. Like there's no way a band, you know, unless you're headlining like decent sized clubs and stuff like that, you're not making the money back. And even then, the overhead of something like a bigger tour like that, you know, you're paying for more merch, you might be hiring a sound guy, you might be hiring a driver, and at that point you're probably not making money either. So, you know, it's funny how it works. And that's kind of touring. But yeah, I am back home, so I'll be doing some more videos and stuff. I think with how I've done things so far has been like music and gaming. I think I'll be moving the gaming to something else and then just keeping this channel for music stuff. And, you know, I might expand what we do. I might do some guitar related things, and I might do some things like this and some more reviews and stuff like that that might be a little bit shorter than like the whole reaction stuff, especially for the albums. But yeah, I think that's it. If I think of anything else, I will include it perhaps in a later video or a part 2 or whatever. If you have any questions about touring, you know, or my experience or whatever, leave them in the comments and I'll take them a read. I expect this video to go live on a Wednesday, which is the 25th. Anyway, that'll do it for this one. Thanks for checking it out. Hope you learned a little something. Again, if you have any questions about touring or whatever, you can send me a message or you can leave a comment and I will get to it. Cool? Cool. All right. Catch you in the next one. Deuce.